So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us to talk a little bit about college softball recruiting in the times of coronavirus, and covering some of those changes and the impacts that current events are having and will continue to have on the recruiting space, specifically for some of the high academic softball programs that we work with here at Head First. And you see there on the screen the two largest buckets that we're going to kind of cover tonight are the impacts on the recruiting space that we're seeing and will continue to see over the next few years. And then really importantly, what student athletes can do right now during this time when things are a bit more at a standstill or a bit more constrained and restricted than they typically would be on a typical April 16th. What can student athletes do to continue to advance their recruiting process? Before we dive into the content for the evening, you heard from all three of us, but just some quick backgrounds. So Matt, could you give yourself a quick intro here?
Absolutely. Thanks, Max. My name is Matt Sternberg. I'm the Director of Business Development for the honor roll camps, both baseball and softball, as well as Top 96. Been with Head First a little over 5 years, and it's been amazing. I see a lot of familiar names that are attending this webinar now. It's been a great opportunity for me to be able to help families, put them in a position to really be able to succeed in the college sports world, being able to give great advice, spending time at camp, and ultimately creating experiences that will allow student athletes to take that next step. So we hope that this will do the exact, the exact same, obviously in a different vein tonight. So thanks again, Max.
Yeah, and Matt, thank you for being here. I know, thank you for taking the time out of your evening to talk to some of our families. My name is Max McKenna. I'm our Senior Manager of Marketing for the Showcase Division, including the Top 96 and the honor roll camps, baseball and softball. I played baseball in college. I went to Amherst, where I graduated in 2011, played for 4 years there, and then went into a teaching and coaching career at the high school level, first at Phillips Andover Academy up in Massachusetts, where I was an assistant baseball coach and a teaching fellow in history and social sciences, and then went and got a full-time teaching position outside New York City at a small school called the Masters School, and there head baseball coach, history instructor, dorm parent, kind of living that independent school life. I had the distinguished honor of being, for 2 summers while I was in college, being the intern for the honor roll camps division at Head First. Came back full-time to Head First 6 years ago, so have been working really closely with this division over the last 10 years, but really full-time for the last 6 years, talking to families like you guys and putting on some events to help you guys move your recruiting process forward. Kevin.
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Keane. I graduated from NYU in 2017. Prior to that, I attended honor roll as a camper in 2012. Just like Max, I was a 2-time honor roll intern during my time in college. And then I rejoined Head First on a full-time basis a little over a year and a half ago as the Associate of Marketing for our Showcase Division, working very closely with Max and Matt on our honor roll and Top 96 camps.
And I will say there have only been, in the history of Head First, there have only been two-time honor roll camp interns, and they're both on this webinar. So I hope you feel as fortunate as I do to be one of those and to be sharing this this digital spotlight with Kevin as well.
We never let you forget it,
And so here's a quick agenda for the evening. As I mentioned, these first 2 bullets are where we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about the impacts of the coronavirus on the recruiting process, the suspension of the softball season, this dead period that the NCAA has implemented until May 31st. What does this mean for this recruiting cycle and then for student athletes coming up over the next few years in the recruiting space as well? Then we'll also spend a lot of time talking about what can student athletes be doing right now to continue to advance their development in their recruiting process despite everything going on. We're also going to then briefly touch on some additional resources that we'd like to put you in touch with, things that we consult in putting together this stuff, and when we talk to families to give you guys access to some of those other resources that are more specialized in certain areas. And then we're going to take the bulk of the evening or as much time as possible, rather, as much time as we need to, dedicated to the live Q&A at the end. So if you have a question that comes up, we'll sprinkle some throughout the course of the evening as well, if they're particularly relevant to what we have just covered or what we're about to talk about. But the bulk of the Q&A will be towards the end there. If you have a question, type it right into that questions tab, fire it away. Kevin is going to be collecting those, and then he will kind of curate them and phrase those out to either Matt or myself during that Q&A portion. So first up, impacts on the recruiting process of current events. So when we started to frame up this conversation, a really important piece is what have the NCAA Division I decisions been so far, and then what are the kind of cascading effects from these. The most important one is that the NCAA Division I, II, and III, all of these governing bodies, the councils at all three major NCAA divisions have given an eligibility waiver to all spring student athletes. This is across all divisions, across all years of college. So if you're a freshman in college this year, next year will be your first year of eligibility, and you still have 4 years from next year. So it's kind of like you're repeating your freshman year. If you're a college class of 2020 and you were set to graduate this spring, you still have an extra year of eligibility for next year for you to use. So you have a 5th year of eligibility because the season was suspended. This will have ramifications that we'll talk about in terms of roster size and competition for spots and everything else like that. But this is really, this was decided in late March, early April by the NCAA. I think a really positive decision in terms of giving these student athletes access to their eligibility for one more year if they choose to take advantage of it. Now, knowing that a lot of student athletes aren't going to take advantage of it, which we'll talk in more detail as well. One kind of key crux of this decision is the NCAA top-down has granted this 1-year extension of eligibility, but they've also given a lot of leeway and autonomy to the schools to decide kind of how students are using this. They have eligibility, but a program, an athletic department, and a team and a coach has a lot of leeway in kind of deciding how a student athlete is going to come back. So what they can do is seniors who are set to graduate, they can bring them back for their extra year of eligibility next year at either the same scholarship level that they were at this past year or less. So what you're going to see is some college softball programs that don't necessarily want to be carrying extra bodies next year might say, hey, senior, we love you. We've loved having you as a part of our program. You were on a 50% scholarship. We'd love to have you back. You can come back if you want, but just know that we can't offer you that scholarship. On scholarships, Division I fully funded programs are capped at 12 scholarships. What is interesting about this year of eligibility is the NCAA, going hand in hand with that, has extended a waiver to that for next year. So for the 2020 into 2021 season and school year, spring sport seniors who are returning for a 5th year, their scholarships will not count against this 12 scholarship max that you see at fully funded Division I programs. So if I'm a team, a roster of, let's say to make it round, 20, I have a roster of 20 this year in 2020. 5 of them were seniors, and they reach on a 50% scholarship for a total of 2.5 scholarships. If all 5 of those seniors come back and I keep them at their level of scholarship, those 2.5 scholarships do not count against the 12 scholarship max. Those 12 scholarships that I still have to divvy out and give to student athletes is between the high school class of 2020, so their incoming recruiting class, through the class of 2021 in their school, so the current juniors, and that any seniors that return will not count against that scholarship maximum. With this, what's interesting about softball and different from some other sports, and notably from baseball, where there is a hard roster cap of 35 student athletes, there isn't a hard capacity or set limit on how many players a Division I program can carry. But if you look at most rosters, they tend to be in the 15 to 20 player range. So the potential impact for this eligibility extension is if all the seniors in a given program come back, and they have this incoming recruiting class that is, stepping onto campus for the first time next August or September, you might see potentially an increase in the roster size at some of these programs. So that's something that we'll talk about in terms of the ramifications for the committed 2020 and 2021 high school student athletes, and also for uncommitted 2021s and younger who are starting to go through the recruiting process as well. One note here as well is that we're going to talk primarily about the Division One and Division Three spaces, because that is where our partner programs and a lot of these high academic schools tend to congregate. The most helpful analogy for Division Two to keep those in mind is it functions a lot like Division One. There is scholarship money. Division Two is primarily working in lockstep with the Division One decisions. They also have given the eligibility extension. Those scholarships also will not count against their cap. So the Division Two programs are mostly functioning in terms of the decisions they're making in line with the Division One programs as another division of the NCAA that also does have scholarship money, although not as much as at the Division One level. Division Three, what's unique about it is that they also have this extra year of eligibility. The NCAA Division Three Council also granted this year of extra eligibility, but Division Three teams from the top down, division wide, do not have athletic scholarships to be giving. So that's an important piece. If you're looking at a Division Three program and you're asking yourself, how many girls on the Amherst College softball team are going to come back for a fifth year? If they're going to come back for a fifth year, it means they're going to be paying their full tuition, or their full tuition minus financial aid. So that's an important distinction at the Division Three level, and something that also will impact the recruiting space at the Division One space different than it will impact the Division Three programs and how they deal with this extra year of eligibility and all the kind of budgetary and financial concerns that will come hand in hand with having a few extra girls in the team and a few extra scholarship dollars on the roster.
And Max, one important piece just to back up a little bit is, what we know, right, is a lot about the Ivy Leagues, which we should talk about here, and kind of their restrictions. And then I really want to jump into how this is going to affect, because the majority of folks who are on here are 2021s, probably that are uncommitted, or 2022s, and the cascading effects of that. But what I think is really important is, at least at a lot of the higher academic schools where there is not necessarily a reason to come back, which we touched on a little bit, right? Except for the fact that, I want to continue my career, which is very important, but having to come up with an extra even $10,000, $15,000, $30 or $40 or $50,000 is not as easy when you've just completed 4 years and working really hard at a high academic school, or a school that's provided you with a great degree. You're ready to finish and you're ready to go off and accept a job in finance or go to law school in Chicago or New York or whatever that may be. So I think there's going to be effects. I think it's going to look different at each school. And I think that there's certain schools that are going to prevent a lot of what's actually going on here. But I think that's important that we want to just establish with folks so they have a better understanding of that.
Absolutely, and 100%, and really well put, Matt. I mean, I think that to cover the first part, that Ivy League consideration, when we say high academic Division One schools, that is kind of like that's the holy grail, right? That's the peak of the mountain that you're kind of looking at, and the first one that comes to mind. What's interesting about the Ivy League is that they're Division One program, but they have no athletic scholarships to give, first of all. So this 12 scholarships applies to Division One programs, but not to them. Other leagues like the Patriot League have more limited scholarships, but the Ivy League is the Division One program that doesn't have any athletic money to give to student athletes. Also, an interesting piece about the Ivy League in particular is they do not allow graduate students to be competitive in their sports. So you cannot be on an Ivy League roster and be a graduate student, which means that these seniors who are at Harvard or Princeton or Columbia who have this extra year of eligibility, if they want to use it, they're going to have to use it somewhere else, because that no grad transfer and no graduate student rule has been in effect for the Ivy League for a long time. But they came out on the heels of this decision from the NCAA and said, even though there is a 1-year eligibility extension for our student athletes, they cannot take this fifth year at our institutions. The Ivy League is standing by that rule about no grad players on the rosters. So that's an important thing to consider. So the impact of this extra year of eligibility on an Ivy League roster will essentially be negated, and you won't really see this bloated roster potentially at an Ivy League school, because their seniors are all going to go somewhere else, whether that's off to their job offer or to graduate school, or if they want to play their fifth year of eligibility, they're going to have to transfer and do that somewhere else. The other point that Matt touched on that's a really good one is there's a lot of reasons to stay and take advantage of this extra year of eligibility. College athletics is a formative experience. It's incredibly additive to what you're doing in college, and it's wonderful to be around those teammates that you love and play this game that you love. But there's also a lot of financial considerations for families, especially for girls who are on a partial or no scholarship. If they're a recruited walk-on or a walk-on in a program and they don't have scholarship money, are they going to pay an extra year of tuition? Or if they're on a 50% scholarship, are they going to pay the extra 50% for that extra year of school? Or are they going to do a one-year master's program that they weren't otherwise considering just so that they can take advantage of this fifth year when they might have, law school, business school, a job at Teach for America, a job on Wall Street waiting for them on the other side? There's a lot of reasons that for individual student athletes that they would not take advantage of this. And we are certainly hearing about that to some degree, especially on the softball side, of girls who would love to stick around and play, but they just can't necessarily do so because they are moving on to the next phase of their life, which is life after softball, life after college, whether that's, a job offer, grad school, whatever the case may be.
And I think, Max, also parents are having a lot of say in this, and we're hearing that is they've only budgeted for a certain amount of money to be able to do this. And at a time when, softball is that important, I think there is a lot of this where it is time to step on and move on, given even the culture and kind of where we are right now.
100%. 100%. Now, the recruiting impacts of this, and we've touched on this a little bit, but first I want to talk about the committed 2020s and 2021s who are in a different space than the second bullet of the uncommitted student athletes who are going through the recruiting process right now. So for the class of 2020 who have committed to a school, the vast majority of them have signed a National Letter of Intent, an NLI, which is a binding two-way document. It commits the school to that student athlete. It commits the student athlete to that school. And this is an NCAA document that they recognize, and they say, this is a binding contract. This means that you are going for this amount of scholarship that they've given you, and you're committed to attend. Here you go. This NLI and maintaining the integrity of this National Letter of Intent is, I believe, a big impetus and a big reason that the NCAA did take this scholarship stance and say returning seniors won't count against your scholarships because they understand that their member institutions have financial commitments to those seniors, but also they have a legally binding financial commitment to their incoming class who have signed this document as well. And so they have told 4, 5, 6 girls in the 2020 high school class, we are committing X dollars to you or Y percentage of a scholarship to you. And so they wouldn't really be able to balance those two things if they didn't give a 1-year waiver on this scholarship maximum. What's interesting about the 2021 commitments is that the 2021 class has not reached the early signing period, and so they do not have this National Letter of Intent. They do not have this binding document between them and the schools that they have committed to. Their commitments are verbal commitments. Verbal commitments are absolute currency within the recruiting world, and they are a super important practice for college coaches and for high school student athletes. But the NCAA doesn't recognize verbal commitments as binding. And so right now, the NCAA has only extended this scholarship waiver for 1 year. So it will only apply for the 2021 season. After that, it will return to the 12 scholarship maximum at every program, even if the next 4 years of student athletes also have the opportunity to stick around for an extra year and use that eligibility if they aren't going off to their next step. So what you might see is these verbal commitments might not be necessarily as firm. I think that one thing that we really believe is that verbal commitments are a handshake deal, and it's about finding a coach that you have a trust and a rapport with. And they are as good as that, right? They're as good as the relationship that you have. So if you are a 2021 verbally committed student athlete, focus on building that relationship and really focus on open communication with that coach that committed you. And that's a really good way to set it up so that you know exactly where you stand. But just given that the NCAA does not recognize those verbal commitments, it leaves the 2021 committed student athletes in a different place than a 2020s because of that 1-year waiver on scholarships that I don't think is likely to extend. The NCAA hasn't necessarily come out and said it is stopping after 2021 with this waiver on scholarships, but I would be pretty surprised if it did extend beyond that, even though the eligibility extension does go apply for all current college student athletes. In terms of the impact on uncommitted student athletes, which, as Matt said, I imagine is the bulk of the families on this webinar, there are potential impacts of this eligibility extension in particular on the way that you guys are going to go about your recruiting process. And this is for everybody, for 2021s, 22s, 23s, even 24s, given the fact that, this year's college 2024s, college freshmen, also have this extra year of eligibility, so they could still be around for an extra year. This will work its way out of the system naturally over the next handful of years, just because this extra year of eligibility either will be used or won't be used, but eventually all the players who have this 5th year will work their way through the system. But during the time that it is working its way through, you might see a little bit more of these 2 bullet points, which is you might see rosters that are a little bit bigger. Instead of a roster being at 15 or 16, you might see it at 18 or 19 because there's a couple girls who stuck around for that extra year in any given class, which might mean more competition for roster spots, more competition for playing time on those rosters. As Matt mentioned, a lot of this decision to stick around is going to be driven by student athletes and what they think is best for them and best for their family. But also a lot of it is also going to be driven by the coach. We are hearing from, some student athletes and some coaches who have talked to their senior class and essentially counseled them out. And they said, look, we love you. We've loved having these 4 years with you, but if you're going to take advantage of this, we really think it should be somewhere else. I can't guarantee you the opportunities that you had because I have committed to the incoming freshmen, the incoming recruits that I have, the incoming recruiting class. So some mix of, you might see a bit, a couple extra names on each roster. You might see some increased competition for playing time, but you also will see a lot of coaches handling this in their program in particular, and it will vary from program to program. The other thing that could,
Max,
yeah, go ahead.
Jumping in, what I think is important here is that what we're trying to say is this is going to have impacts on these classes, on the 2020s, 21s, and even getting down to 22s and 23s, right? It naturally will, but we feel and we believe that it will work itself out, and that this is not something that you should feel completely shattered about, and that your recruiting chances and your hopes to go to a certain school is going to be over. I think that is really, really important for the folks on this now, is that feel confident that if you follow the steps that you're currently doing with some adaptations, that it is going to work out, and that your student athletes should feel confident, because this is not going to be something that year after year is just going to make a massive, massive effect on what you're doing, but it is certainly going to interrupt here and there what is happening, especially over the next year.
Absolutely. And one of the most concrete ways in which this could impact these uncommitted students and the 2021s, 2022s especially, is the availability of scholarship dollars, depending on how much a given coach or program has committed to a student coming back for a 5th year. If that's the case, if they've committed half a scholarship or 2 scholarships to a 5th class of students, it might mean that some of their incoming classes might have a little bit less available. And it might mean that instead of a 50% scholarship or 75%, you're getting a 25% scholarship, or there's a smaller recruiting class in some of these years. You could see this. Again, it will depend on the different program. The good news behind this is the key takeaways that we have here at the bottom of the screen. Neither of these things are new. It's just a matter of degree, not a categorical change in how we are looking at student athletes going through the recruiting process. Key number 1 is focus on holistic school fit. This has always been the case. This has been what we preach about the recruiting process and the college selection process, is you need to focus on what school fits you best, not which program is giving me the most money or which program do I see most often on ESPN. It's about finding the right college experience that will set you up for success for 4 years in school, and then also all those years after the softball cleats come off for the final time. So focusing on school fit, always important, but now more important than ever, because as we've seen this spring, a softball career is not guaranteed. Whether it's an injury in high school, an injury in college, a global pandemic, or just graduating college, a softball career comes to an end eventually, whether it's after high school, after college, or after 15 years on Team USA. It doesn't matter. Eventually, the cleats come off for the last time. And so focusing on school fit is the best way that we see student athletes prepare themselves for what comes next after that. The second part here is arriving on campus ready to compete for a spot and compete for playing time. Yes, you're stepping into a team atmosphere, and these teams function a lot like families, but guess what? They're competitive families. This is not new. The class of 2019, 2018, 2017, they all had to arrive on campus ready to compete for a job on the team that they had committed to. They are competing with their peers for the starting spot, for playing time, for that role of leadership in the locker room, whatever it is. This is not new, but again, if you're seeing rosters that have a few extra girls on them, it might mean that this competition for playing time is a little bit stiffer, or there's a bit more of a sharper point on some of this this area of competition between your teammates. Always been there, and I think it's something that goes under noticed. You kind of look at your college commitment as that's the finish line, and then I'm in college playing softball, which is true, but also once you step on campus in August or September, you got to come ready to play and really make a good impression on your teammates and also on your coaches, because, make no bones about it, you are competing for playing time and for a job with the other girls in that program, especially those at your position. Next, we're going to talk about what student athletes can do right now to continue to move their recruiting forward. And we're going to focus on 4 areas you see there on the screen. Physical development, how am I getting faster, stronger? In-game and softball development, how am I, honing my mechanics and fundamentals so that when I do step foot on a field again, whenever that is, I'm ready to play the game of softball and also be faster and stronger. Then also academics, classroom academics, and standardized test prep, and then specifically the recruiting process, thinking about how are you building out your coach list, how are you communicating, or your school list rather, how are you communicating with coaches during this time, all these pieces of the puzzle so that you can hit the ground running later on whenever this opens back up to make the next strides in your recruiting process. As we focus on those 4 areas, we also want you guys to keep in mind these 4 keywords: motivation, discipline, proactivity, and the ability to ask for help. These are the areas that you're focusing on, but these are the keywords that you are looking at and thinking about. Here are some of the keys to success. And what's I think is interesting about this time is that a lot of these things, you don't necessarily need to ask for help because it's organically coming up. You're getting that instruction from a high school teacher or from a hitting instructor or from a coach because you are face to face with them. Well, right now, without that face to face time, you need to be a little bit more willing to go out and seek that help. Proactivity. A lot of things for student athletes are more structured, and you organically come by some opportunities. You're playing in that travel ball tournament on the weekend. There might be some coaches there. You might get some eyes on you. Without some of those organic, just natural things happening right now, because everything is more closed down, you have to be more proactive in seeking out some of these opportunities and making some of these intelligent decisions for yourself. Discipline and motivation. These are things that for high school student athletes, your structure is largely given to you, right? You have the team lift in the morning, you have school from, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Then you have practice from 3:30 to 6:30, and then you have homework, and then you have family dinner, and the structure of your day enforces that discipline and holds you accountable just by its sheer presence. And it motivates you to do that because you have the teammates that are looking you in the eye and counting on you, or you have the teammates who are picking you up during the game or in practice. Right now it's different because you don't have those same things. And so you need to drive this motivation and this discipline and this accountability from an internal place rather than have it delivered by the other structures in your life, by the school, by teachers, by coaches, by instructors, by parents. It's more on you to implement this for yourself so that you can be successful and so that you can take advantage of what ultimately an opportunity in front of you over the next couple months to get better, to get faster, to get stronger, to prep for your SATs or ACTs. To take advantage of this, you need to be able to focus on these 4 areas to be able to do that.
And Max, to these 4 points, I think it's really, really important that, to try to, and we say this, we'll continue to say it, is keep it simple, simplify this, have, keywords up there for like this, for your student athlete, for yourself even, to be able to follow your day by day. Right now, this is an unknown sort of territory that we're all in. So imagine being 14, 15, 16 years old and dealing with this and having what you've been looking forward to, potentially that softball season, the high school season, or, potentially the summer, what that's going to look like, ripped away or potentially in jeopardy. So this is really on us as adults and parents to say, what can we do to set our kids up for success and make sure that they understand that, hey, this, as everyone said, this too shall pass, or we hope it will, and to motivate these kids to get them in a place that, hey, someone across the country, they're not able to get on the field either. It's a level playing field. We know that, but they're working. They're doing things that we'll get into, working out or studying or working on their SAT or ACT prep and trying to get creative. So that needs to be the motivation to find that new normal with that discipline that is not going to look the same where you're at workouts or out of the house for 12, 14, 16 hours a day. So I think that's really important for parents to be able to take that and see how they can implement it into their own daily lives with their kids.
Absolutely. And it's also worth noting that these 4 things that we're asking you guys to focus on and we're saying are really important are not easy, right? Finding the discipline to create your own structure when it isn't given to you, to, go out and we'll talk about this, but to go out and do hill sprints just because you say you have an internal hunger to get better, that's not easy to stick to that plan. But it's important to build the discipline and the motivation, because guess what? This is kind of a sneak peek at some of the independence that you'll have later on in life that you're going to have to manage successfully as well. Whether it's in college when you have fewer class hours and more kind of autonomy and there isn't somebody looking over your shoulder all the time. It's important to build these things now, and this creates the opportunity and the necessity to do that a little bit earlier maybe than you were planning, but all really important stuff to have in your bag of tricks and your toolkit for later on as you navigate other aspects of your life. First up here is physical development, getting faster, stronger. First bullet here can't be overstated. It's really important right now to stay healthy. To be able to continue to make strides forward, you need to make sure that you're able to do something every day, which means staying healthy, following the guidelines about what is going to keep you and your family safe and healthy during this time. That's bullet number 1. Number 2 is continuing home workouts in a way that you are able to do. So one quote that I love is from Tim Corbin, who's the head baseball coach at Vanderbilt, defending national champions in Division I for baseball. And he was asked, what are your players focused on when they're at home? And he says, worth noting, number 1, their priority is going to be their academics because they're still in school. And this is some really good baseball players, but guess what? They're still in the classroom. And then down here below, you see, what can they do? They can do a lot of primitive things. There's a lot of things you can do with your body if you move it outside and if you got some creativity. And different sport, baseball, softball, but for my money, if you're looking at a defending national champion at the peak of their game, and they can do things with body weight exercises or with simple equipment and still get better away from all of the resources and the weight rooms and the trainers and all the things that they typically have, tech and tools and tricks that they typically have access to, and they're still able to get better, it's good enough for high school student athletes as well. If you're able to keep it simple and get creative, you'll see this throughout a lot of this, but this is a really key idea right now, is working within the constraints that you have. How can you use what you have to do what you can? You probably don't have the force plate that's measuring your output. You probably don't have a leg press machine in your garage. You may or may not have a squat rack and plates in your garage. Who knows? But if you have a dumbbell, instead of doing back squats, you can do goblet squats. If you don't have a dumbbell, guess what? You can find a hill and do hill sprints until you collapse, and that's going to build leg strength as well. So if you keep it simple, if you get creative, you can still make a lot of strides right now. It has not always been the case that high school or college softball players have all the tools and technology and tricks that we do in this day and age, but they were still pretty good at softball. So let's key off them and do those low tech, simple things that are within the constraints that we currently have to still keep moving forward and getting faster, getting stronger, to get better at the game of softball. Next up is specific to softball development, right? How am I getting better at my specific sport? And there's 4 things here that I, again, would focus on within this. The first one is gamify your reps when and however possible. And by this, I'm referring to 2 things. One is gamify them in the sense that keep them fun, interesting, novel, new, so that you stay invested. Because taking 200 mindless swings off of a tee is not going to give you the same return as an exercise or a drill where you are fully invested and fully present and aware for what you're doing. So keeping it fun and interesting as a way of keeping yourself invested in what you're doing is a really good way to make those reps count more. The other thing that I mean here is make your reps and drills and skill work as game-like as possible. Make your tee work, make your soft toss or front toss or backhand fundamental work, make that more difficult in a game-like situation. You're not going to be out playing live softball for a while, which, is not fun, right? It's the game you love. That's what you want to be doing. But if you gamify your reps and if you make them more game-like and more difficult and you challenge yourself in unique ways now, when it does open back up, you're going to be more ready for that, that first drop curve that comes your way in a way that the girl who was not doing that prep or not thinking about it this way isn't going to be able to adjust to. You're going to, if you make things more challenging for yourself now in an intentional and intelligent way, you're going to quicken your learning curve and getting back to your prime game time performance.
And Max, before you go to that second bullet point right there, we're not asking, especially parents that may not be coaches, that may not have the insight like this that others will, to come up and come up with all these creative things. We're going to have some resources later on here to be able to guide you toward them. But one thing that kids and families didn't have 10, 15, 20 years ago is the amount of technology that we have now to be able to go on social media or to go on to different forums and to be able to take different aspects from what people are doing in Iowa or California or DC or wherever you are. That's where you can get creative and where kids can get creative. And many of you are paying and playing on very expensive and quality travel teams. And that's where they need to really step in and help you out. So I don't think we're asking, and we said this a lot, we don't need everybody to reinvent the wheel. But what you can do is you can take this and you can put this into a routine for yourself. On Mondays, we do this. On Tuesdays, we do that. You find a new thing that looks awesome online, great. Try that out on the next day. And I think those are the types of things that can keep your mind right, but also keep you as fit as possible and ready as possible. So
absolutely. A really important piece of this is recruiting the resources around you so that you don't need to come up with all this on your own. Go to your hitting instructor, your pitching coach, your travel coach. Go to the internet. I mean, the internet is an amazing place for finding all sorts of things, and some of them are really applicable here. You can find whole exercises just dedicated to how do I work on my backhand in a confined space, I'm sure. And we'll point you towards some of those resources, but it is important, as Matt mentioned, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about recruiting the resources that you have at your disposal so that you can work most effectively within the constraints that you have. This second bullet point here seems a bit goofy. It's a personal phrase that I had when I was pitching out of the bullpen that I got from a mentor coach of mine in college. Stay ready to get ready to stay ready. What this means to me is that what the work that you do right now is what's going to make you able to more quickly adjust to being back in the swing of things once things open up, right? It's going to accelerate your learning curve. The work that you do now and coming out ahead of this, social distancing and kind of this shutdown, more broad shutdown, in a few months or whenever it is, the work you do now is going to set you up for success after that. So this is you getting ready to stay ready so that when you come out of this, you can really get back up to speed as quickly as possible and make an impact when it matters. This third bullet, I think, is something that softball, I love softball. It's a year-round sport and it's great. And the level of softball at all types of schools, college, high school, travel programs, has all gone up because it has become a year-round sport. But with that goes also the the reality of some repetitive stress injuries because you're moving your body in the same way for all 12 months of the year. So as devastating as it is that you're not playing the game that you love, this does build in a rest period for you to make sure that you are staying healthy. This doesn't mean just rest and don't do anything and and sit on the couch and say, oh no, I'm staying healthy. It's about building in rest periods over the course of the spring and summer where you are working hard, you are sprinting for a period, and then you are resting for a period to make sure that you are taking care of your body and staying healthy. I think that we see in baseball and softball, we see a lot of injuries to young bodies based on the repetitive motions that we see in both sports. And so it's really important to build in these rest periods and so that you are able to take care of yourself. But during a typical, spring high school season or travel season, directly into the summer travel season and showcase circuit, straight into the fall ball circuit, it's really tough to have these rest periods built in sometimes for young student athletes who want to be playing all the time. This is one. We say at Head First, obstacles open opportunities, or the obstacle is the way. Yes, having your high school season or travel season suspended is an obstacle and it is not fun, but what is the silver lining to this rain cloud? What is the opportunity that this opens up? And this to me is one of them. This fourth bullet point rather is keep it simple, get creative. Again, we said it on the physical development, also applies to softball. What can you do right now with the restraints that you have, the equipment restraints you have, the space that you have or don't have? What can you do right now working within your confines to still get better? Do that. If that's a tarp in your garage, great. If that's, mom and dad have built a hitting tunnel in your backyard, great. That's fantastic. If there's a softball field across the street, fantastic. It doesn't even need to be any of that though. This is one of my favorite pictures so far of all of this is a tee set up in a bedroom with a wiffle ball tied to a weight in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. I've lived in 2-bedroom apartments in New York. They are not big. I'm sure we have folks on this webinar who know just how small these and confined these things can be. But guess what? Not an excuse to not keep working. This is a creative solution. What's unique about this as well is that this softball player had the blast sensor on her bat. So not only was she getting reps swinging, but also she was getting some of this immediate and data-driven feedback so that she could take a look at her attack angle and take a look at her rotational force in a way that was still meaningful feedback, even though it's just a wiffle ball on a tee. You don't have to have that blast sensor to do something like this and to still make strides in your game. So if a 16-year-old in Brooklyn can set this up, I'm guessing that you guys can all find some way to work within your confines and constraints to keep focusing on softball and keep getting better, whether it's a tee in your bedroom with the ball tied down to a weight so you don't break too many windows, or mom and dad, forgive me, but you find a wall of the house, outside preferably, and you're just throwing a softball against it and you're working on your backhand technique and you're just doing that for a few hours. There are ways to get better if you're able to think creatively, recruit the resources around you, keep it simple, and really focus on the skill set that matters, and you'll be able to make some really good strides in your game. Next is academics and standardized test prep. It is absolutely crucial that right now, even though the paradigm for your high school has probably changed and it probably isn't you showing up at a high school building and walking from class to class right now, it is absolutely crucial that you keep your foot on the gas in the classroom. I know that I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but even if your school has gone to pass fail, some schools are pass fail now because they're remote learning, some schools are still taking grades, whatever the case, if you're still getting grades, guess what? They're going to be on your transcript in the application that you submit to your dream school. If it's pass fail, guess what? Next semester's math is going to build off the stuff you learn in this semester's math. So it's still important to not just barely scrape by because you can. So keeping your foot on the pedal in the classroom is absolutely critical. But it's also an easier thing to lose sight of or to skate on right now when you are, instead of showing up to a classroom and raising your hand and asking the teacher for help in person, you're in a Zoom classroom or you're submitting all your stuff by email or whatever the case may be. The paradigm shifts, but your effort doesn't. You're still doing all the things that you need to be successful this semester, next spring, all setting the table for that transcript that is going to be the complete picture of your the work you did academically in high school, so that you can open some of those softball and academic doors at the college level as well.
And Max, I also think the point of that is you're going to be in a position now where bad habits can creep in. These kids have done such a great job of staying focused because a lot of it has looked alike day after day or semester after semester, where this doesn't. So we don't want kids to develop these bad habits where it's easy to, if they're on a Zoom call with their class for 3 hours or 4 hours a day and they can just kind of skate by, and all of a sudden that's not what the typical student athlete that they're used to being because of this structure. We want to make sure that they're focusing on what they can to continue to get better and better. And then obviously I'll let you touch on the test prep, because I think to me that's probably one of the more important things given the amount of time that has opened up for these kids right now.
Absolutely. And I'm going to kind of flip these second and third bullets. As Matt mentioned, building a routine and being disciplined and sticking to it is a great way to create more time in your day. You don't have softball in the same way that you would typically, right? You're not on the bus for the away game. You're not in practice from 3:30 to 7 right now. You're not taking that weekend trip for that weekend series. So you have hours back in your day that you are able to reinvest elsewhere if you are able to build a routine and stick to it. You lose those hours if your first class is at 10, you roll out of bed at 9:59 and flip the laptop open in the living room and just do it that way. But if you still stick to a routine, you are able to create hours in your day that typically would have been dedicated to structured softball things like practice and like games, and reinvest them in your classwork, in your physical development and getting a workout in your drill work and working your backhand off of a wall outside, and then really crucially reinvest in your standardized test prep as well. Everything is shaken up by the situation related to coronavirus, and standardized testing is no different. The College Board announced yesterday that June tests are canceled. They floated the possibility of some kind of take-home or digital SAT. Where that stands is up in the air. But, and also, by the way, in this time, a lot more schools are going to test optional, or at least kind of sticking their toe in the water on test optional and thinking for the class of 2021, maybe we'll be test optional and see how it goes. But it is still really important to reinvest some of this time in standardized test prep as a student athlete, even if you are looking at schools that are test optional. For one thing, not all schools are going to test optional or test flexible. So you will leave more doors open if you do have some testing numbers, rather than purely limiting yourself to schools that aren't requiring an SAT or ACT. But also, specifically for student athletes, the transcript that you submit with all of your 4 years of grades and all of your 4 years of coursework and what classes you were in, the difficulty, the AP, the honors classes, that B+ you struggled for, that A that came easy, that is a better picture of you as a student. But each transcript reads completely differently. It depends on what the grades you got are, certainly, but it also depends on what your school profile is, what is the hardest math class that they offer at your school, and then which ones did you take, what is the difficulty of your coursework. So while admissions departments are really good at reading transcripts and getting a good sense of your academic potential, college coaches can benefit from having a quick and dirty number that is standardized, that it means one thing for any student athlete who hands it to them, and they're able to say, I know what a 31 on the ACT means for most of my student athletes. And yes, the transcript is going to be a really important part, but if I'm a recruiting coach and I look at that 31, I get a pretty good quick sense of where this player that I'm talking to, where they might fall academically in my recruiting class. This is not to say that a number out of 1,600 or a number out of 36 is a statement on your character as a human being or how good or bad a person you are, but it does give coaches a quick insight that is standardized. It always means the same thing into who you might be academically and where you might fall on their kind of relative to what they are looking for academically in their recruited student athletes. So having this number to give to them, even at schools that are test optional, can be a really, really good idea to open some of these doors early in your recruiting process. To recruiting process, we cheated on this one a little bit because this was one of 4 sub bullets, but also it has 4 sub-bullets underneath it. We're going to talk about school research and building out your list of schools, how to communicate with coaches right now, building out your online profile and using video to your advantage, and then also thinking about how you are planning your summer exposure events and building in some flexibility given that things are up in the air to some degree about what might be happening this summer, what might be available or open to you this summer. So first up is school research and list building. When we talk about building a school list, I think one trap that we see student athletes fall into very quickly is they hear school list, and so they start listing schools. Rather than doing that, I always advocate that students focus on school qualities. Not, is this an Ivy League school, or is this a Division I school, or Division III school, or SEC, or ACC, or Patriot League, or NESCAC. Don't focus on the labels, focus on the school qualities. What is the size of the school that I'm looking at? What is the setting? Is it in a city? Is it in the suburbs? Is it 3 hours outside of a city? Is it in the middle of nowhere? Geography, is it close to home? Is it far away? Is it in the Northeast? Is it in in LA? What's the climate like? What's their area of academic strength? All of these qualities of a school are ultimately going to mean a lot more for your 4-year experience there than the labels that they fit under, whether that's an athletic league or a division or whatever. For example, one thing that I hear from a lot of student athletes is, Coach McKenna, I'm interested in Ivy League schools. Great. That's a great kind of star to shoot at. Those are some great schools. But if a student athlete tells me that they're interested in Ivy League schools, what that is telling me is that they are equally considering a school of 3,000 to 4,000 that's in rural New Hampshire and a school of 6,000 or 7,000 that's in the heart of Manhattan. And guess what? Dartmouth in New Hampshire, very different than Columbia in the heart of Manhattan. Very different experiences, different sizes, drastically different settings, different focuses, a wildly different experience. Both great experiences for student athletes, but great experiences for different types of student athletes. So rather than thinking I'm a Division I player or I'm an ACC, SEC, Ivy League, NESCAC, whatever the label that you have in mind is, rather than thinking that way, think, what are the school qualities that I'm looking for that I think can set me up for success, and then find schools that match those qualities. So rather than starting with a list of schools and then start to learn about their qualities, start with a list of qualities and then find schools that match that list of things that you are looking for in your college experience. This is another really good place to reinvest some of the time that you gain back in your day. So the second bullet, use that time that you're not, on that weekend trip with the travel ball team. Do some research on schools. Think critically about what am I looking for in a college experience, and then start to learn about the schools that might start to fit that mold that you're looking for. And once you start to find these fit or match schools, think quality first, or qualities of the school first, and then keep an open mind to find lookalike schools. Because guess what? If you go into this and you say, first you think, okay, I'm looking at a lot of NESCAC schools. I like the NESCAC. Great. Those schools are also pretty different. Tufts, very different from Williams, very different setting, different size, etc. But let's say I'm looking for a school that's 2,000 to 4,000. I'm thinking it should be about 2-ish hours outside of a city. Yes, that's going to put a lot of NESCAC schools on your list, but it also is going to put Grinnell on your list. If you think from the school qualities and you also think with an open mind, you open yourself up to finding schools that you've heard of that fit your list, but also schools that you have never heard of that could be a really, really good, positive college experience. And so then you're able to go into this recruiting cycle and say, okay, yes, I should talk to Jess Johnson at Amherst, but I also should go talk to the Grinnell coaching staff because I learned a bit about their school and I think that they could be the right fit. And you open up all these doors of opportunity that you might not have known existed if you were focused on just this type of school and had these blinders on.
Max, I think to your point though, none of this has really changed in what we were talking about 6 months ago to what we're talking about now. The biggest thing that you guys should take away from this is you have a little bit more time to figure this out, not only with what does my group of 5, 10, 15 schools look like, but I also think it's a good opportunity for kids that may be a little bit younger that say, my dream school is these 3 schools. They may be very large and top quality talent. And I think it's at that time you can start to narrow down and look at these rosters of where these kids are coming from, what their histories were like, to see what the kind of the best options for you from a skill level, but certainly from a fit and a match, even if you don't necessarily know, to start to build out that blueprint.
Absolutely. Next up, coach communication. So right now, coaches who typically would have been in season and taken the road trips every weekend to coach that away game or that away series and all that time in practice, they're not doing that, right? College seasons have been suspended too. And so they have unprecedented number of hours in front of their computer. And they are spending a lot of that communicating with student athletes or looking for student athletes on some of these recruiting platforms that we'll touch on. So it's a really good time to be in communication with coaches on your list. When you do that, here are three really important things for you to focus on. One is you've done this research per Matt's point, where you've reinvested some of this time from that you would have been spending on softball and researching schools. Use that to personalize your communication, your email, your handwritten letter, your text, your call to the coach, to the program, and to the school. What this does to a coach is it makes your email stand out a little bit above the other 200 emails that they're getting from potential recruits. B, it also demonstrates genuine interest in their program. It shows a coach that you have taken the time to not just copy and paste the same email that says, "Dear coach, I love your school. I'd love to play for you." But you've taken the time to do the research and then handcraft a note that says, "Dear Coach Wood, I'm really interested in Harvard because when I stood at the corner of Mass Ave and Harvard Square, I just felt at home. And when I went and, got a burger at Charlie's, it was absolutely perfect." Like, you're able to personalize this, and you're telling this coach, "I am very interested in your school." And doing that really can make you stand out. And coaches want to recruit student athletes who demonstrate interest in their school. Interest is a two-way street, and I think that sometimes that gets lost, where student athletes are inclined to think, "Of course, Coach Wood knows that I'm interested in Harvard. 45,000 people a year apply to Harvard. I'm one of them. I'm not, that's not unique. Everybody likes Harvard. Of course she knows that." But guess what? She doesn't. It's important to communicate your interest very directly to a coach, and personalizing all of your touch points is a really good way to do that. Also, when it comes to personalizing, the other thing that I would say is go beyond just email. Yes, email is important, and because it's easy and free, it's going to be the bulk of your communication with college coaches, but also take advantage of other platforms and ways to talk with them as well. Pick up the phone and call them and leave them a voicemail. Once you've exchanged some notes and you're on a bit more of a personal basis, start exchanging some texts, or send them a handwritten letter. It used to be that nobody sent emails and everybody sent letters. Now, guess what? Coaches are not getting a whole lot of handwritten cards. So if you do that, it demonstrates that you have the interest in this program to take pen to paper, find a stamp, put it in the mailbox, all these things. And also that's taking some time. You're investing some time in doing this. So it's a really good way to stand out in your communication, is to use different channels, whether that's liking and engaging with their stuff on social media, or giving them a call or shooting them a text, or to go along with the emails that you're sending them as well. Important in all of these communications is also to proofread. It seems straightforward, but you wouldn't believe the number of conversations that I have every year with college coaches who say, "Max, you won't believe this. I got 75 emails yesterday, and 50 of them just said, 'Dear Coach,' and 20 of them said, 'Dear Coach, wrong name,' or had the wrong school, or had a detail about my school that we don't have." They said, "I'm really interested in Caltech because I want to study philosophy." And they said, "Great, you're going to have to do that somewhere else because that's actually not a major that we have." So proofreading this stuff and making sure that the email address that you're sending to matches the name of the coach that you're sending to, matches the school that you're sending to, matches those details that you've so thoughtfully personalized. It's really important to go through that checklist and make sure that you are sending the right email to the right coach at the right school with the right details. And mom and dad, this is where you can be a huge, huge help in this coach communication piece. It is really important because coaches are recruiting your daughters. They want to talk to student athletes. They want to recruit and have communications with student athletes. And guess what? They've gotten a lot of emails from kids and potential players, and also have gotten a lot of emails from parents pretending to be their kids. They know the difference between a 15, 16-year-old writing an email and a practicing lawyer or an MD. They know the difference between that writing. So it's important to proofread and edit and provide some feedback and suggestions. That is different than writing or rewriting an email on behalf of your student athlete, which will be transparent to these coaches. The third P of this communication is being proactive. This is always true. You always should be proactively communicating with college coaches that you're interested in, but it's especially true now because some of the organic opportunities aren't coming about in the same way. You're not at a high school game that a local college coach might happen to be at. You're not at that travel tournament that a coach might be scouting during the middle of the week or whatever. These opportunities aren't coming about organically. You're not just crossing paths with people in the way that during a typical April, May, June you might be. So it's really important to double down on this proactivity. There's no secret ingredient, there's no secret pill to a successful outcome in the recruiting process. But if I were to point to one thing that most often paves the way for success, it is being proactive in your process. So always true, but especially right now when the recruiting landscape is certainly a lot different than it typically would be.
But Max, I think what's important with that one is don't just because you have maybe a little bit more time, fire off 200 emails a week to the same, you know what I mean, to the same person. That's not going to help. I think you still, and this holds true now, reach out with a reason. Don't just reach out for the sake of reaching out, but you have the opportunity, you have their eye a little bit more. The second part of that is, we see that we get this question a lot, like, I've written 2 emails to this coach, I just haven't gotten a response. They also get a lot of emails, so sometimes it takes a little bit of time for them to get back to you, or they've read it and they've noted it and they've made their internal notes. So don't be completely discouraged by that. And the last point is also starting to be realistic. You, and I said this earlier, you may think that I am a Power 5 player and I'm going to reach out to those schools that fit in what I see on TV, and maybe that's not necessarily the case, and you're writing to that assistant or to that head coach, and they're not able to get back to you, making sure that you're also staying in tune. And I think those are things that you can start to learn about yourself during this process as you start to reach out to those coaches specifically.
Absolutely. And in the point of kind of hearing back, and I've sent 2 emails and haven't heard anything back, coaches are also bound by NCAA regulations saying that you have to be past a certain date in your college career before they are able to have recruiting specific conversations with you. So, and currently it is only the class of 2021 that has passed September 1st of their junior year. Once a student athlete crosses September 1st in softball, crosses September 1st of their junior year, then college coaches can have recruiting specific conversations where they can talk numbers and talk turkey and say, we got a roster spot for you with X percentage of a scholarship. Before you reach that date, what you hear back from coaches, if you hear back from coaches, will be a form letter saying, due to your age, we are unable to talk about X, Y, and Z. Here are some of our camp dates. Please fill out our recruiting questionnaire. So first step, definitely fill out that recruiting questionnaire because that will keep you in touch with what's going on in their program. But also don't be disheartened by that. They have their hands tied. They cannot be talking to student athletes in that way below that age. But that doesn't mean that they aren't reading these emails. That doesn't mean that they aren't looking at your profile or looking at your video. They are just filing it in a folder of 2022 saying, on September 1st, this is the folder I'm clicking on, and I'm going to start sending some emails to players right then. So it's not going into a black hole, but the response that you get back might not be, perfect, Samantha, you're the perfect fit for our program. We'd love to have you on campus, and here's your scholarship. It won't be that because it can't be, but they are still using this communication. So it's never too early to start some of this dialogue with college coaches. Just understand what the types of responses that you might get depending on where you are relative to the age of the recruiting cycle. Next up, in terms of delivering efficiency in your coach communication, we really do encourage student athletes to create an online profile and also equip it with video. We partner with a company called Sports Recruits, which has paid subscription offerings as well, but you also can go on there, set up your free Sports Recruits profile. You can upload as many videos as you want, and they have a built-in video editor, which is great and makes it really simple to get your video up there. You can attach your transcript and your test scores and your contact information and your travel coach information, all this stuff. What this does is it helps you gain efficiency. First, you only have a single link to include in all the emails that you send to college coaches because it all lives right there. So instead of sending that email to Coach Teague at Columbia and you have these 6 attachments and these 4 YouTube links to your different videos, and then you send the same but adjusted email to Coach Wood at Harvard and you have to go find those same 7 attachments and those same 4 YouTube links, all these things can live in one place. So reinvesting that time of hunting down all these different PDFs and the video links and everything that you need, you can reinvest that time in personalizing the email, and then you just have a single link that you have to send out, and you know that all of the information at that link that you are sending to coaches is up to date, because you don't have to go in and update 6 different things. You just update your profile, and you know that what you are sending out to coaches is the best information. It has all of the video, it has your most recent transcript, it has your updated Twitter handle, whatever it is, all of it's in one place, which is a really good advantage that you can have, so that you aren't spending time on some of these administrative tasks, and you can spend it on the more meaningful side of researching schools, building your list, and personalizing the communication that you have with coaches. Another really important thing when it comes to online profiles is coaches do want to watch videos. I was looking at, I was talking with the Sports Recruit CEO the other day, and he pulled up this graph of coach usage in their platform. And as you might imagine, right now it has absolutely spiked. It is at some of the highest levels that it ever has been, because coaches are in their profiles looking at student athletes, and they are especially focused on looking at video of players. So when you build out this profile, having video can be a huge advantage to put on there, even if it's video that isn't from you, that isn't of you right now. If it's video from earlier this spring or a winter workout or last August, put that in there. Put a date on it so that coaches know, oh, this is Max playing in August of 2019. That's different than the most recent video. And they might ask you for more recent video. If you have it, supply it. But providing video will help them start to get a sense of who you are as a student athlete in a way that just seeing a headshot and a transcript won't necessarily help them do. Also, I think that there's, for some families and for some players, there's a blockage behind how simple it can be to create your own video. In this day and age, the smartphone and iPhone is a pretty remarkable invention and will allow you to capture a lot of the video that you need to at least give coaches a sense of who you are as a player. You don't need, the thousands of dollars of production quality to put in a crossfade on this video and have the text pop up and all this stuff and have it be like professionally filmed, right? If you have a parent or a sibling with a steady hand and you have a smartphone, you can start to capture some of this video yourself, whether it's reps off of a tee or soft toss or some short ground balls, or if you're a pitcher throwing on a shortened, shortened home plate. You can still capture some of your mechanics, whether it's swinging, pitching, fielding, throwing, and give coaches a decent sense of who you are as a player. Yes, eventually they're going to want to look at other video that has more completeness to it, or game video, or whatever it is. But this is a good place to start. And it means that it's a lot easier, even right now, to capture some of this stuff that can help you get coaches' eyeballs on your profile so that you can be in communication with them.
Hey, Max, I want to jump in because we are 10 minutes over the allotted time. So just so everybody knows, this is being recorded and we're going to send it out to everybody. It's going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on our social media, and we'll email it out and follow up with you as soon as we get that uploaded. So if you do have to run, don't worry, it's being recorded. Max and I just like talking about this stuff, and that's why we're a little bit over. So want to address that, but we can keep going.
Absolutely, and it also won't cut into the Q&A. We're still going to stick around as long as we need to on the Q&A. If you have a question but you have to leave, type it in the chat box, fire it away, and we will get back to you over the next couple of days to make sure that we get you the answer to whatever it is you have on your mind. Summer recruiting, planning, and flexibility is another area of focus that we would encourage student athletes to think through right now. And you see here again these 4 bullets. These first 3 are the heaviest emphasis that we will place right now. It's always important for high academic student athletes, especially, to get efficiency in their recruiting process. It's not necessarily being at the tournament that has 7,000 coaches if only 5 or 10 of them are the right fit for you or might be the right fit for you. It's about targeting a high volume of schools that might be right for you. It's not just all the schools, it's the right schools. And this summer more than ever, when we're looking at a probably truncated recruiting window for college coaches, it's even more important to target efficiency in what you are doing, which could mean some trade-offs and some tough decisions as you move through your summer. But instead of going to the event that has 200 coaches but only a handful that you're looking at, maybe targeting an event that has 50 or 60 coaches and 20 or 30 of them are ones that might be on your list. Especially for high academic student athletes, that efficiency is really, really important, where you might not be looking at school X, but school, these leagues and these schools are all at one event. That's going to be the most efficient thing for you to do. The other thing that we have focused on, and this comes from college coaches that we work with, is they are more and more focused on data analytics and video, especially in this summer. And this is all stuff that we try to provide and deliver at our camps because of the appetite that our coaches have. With a shortened recruiting cycle or shortened recruiting window this summer, possibly, coaches still need to make decisions on recruits for the 2021 class, for the 2022 class, by the same endpoint, right? They're still looking at that September 1st when they know some recruits are going to come off the board. They're still looking at that as a target date. They're still looking at the early admission deadline or the regular admission deadline as the date that they are working backwards from. But with less time leading up to that, where they are off campus in recruiting activities, they need to get the same complete view of a player with less time and possibly seeing them fewer times. This is where data analytics and video can really play to your advantage, because while a coach, wants to see you play and they'll see you play, instead of having to see you play 3, 4, 5, 6 times, if they see you play once or twice and they have some data on you, they can put those two things together to get a more complete picture of who you are as a player. Put that together with some video, some in-game footage, some new showcase footage that you get over the summer, and they can really start to get a complete package of who you are as a player in a shortened window and by expending fewer resources during what is going to be a little bit tighter recruiting window this summer.
And Max, before the proactivity and the next 2 bullet points there, being really, really smart as we talk about efficiency with what you decide this summer is going to be, honestly, it'll be make or break for a lot of people. So what I think needs to happen is finding events that are going to be the best for you in a real shortened time, as Max was saying before, because nothing is guaranteed. The travel season, we don't know. All the events that's out there, we don't know. But looking at some of the ones that may be higher price points, I look at head first, okay? We look at what are events that are going to be data analytics, video that's going to give the coaches that insight. That's where we're seeing a lot more people that are saying, you know what, this makes more sense for me this year more than ever, because we're not going to be able to spend all this other money on other things because there may not be that opportunity. So it's looking at those types of things, whether it's our event, whether it's, and we'll talk about this, a school specific camp or something that you've been wanting to go to. The time is now to really be able to look into the summer to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And that really plays into this proactivity piece. That's the third bullet there. In a typical summer where you're playing at tournaments all the way from, early June through mid-August, whatever it is, there's the opportunity where you're going to get some organic exposure just by the virtue of what you are doing and the tournaments you're going to, the games you're playing. Coaches are out on the recruiting trail. You're going to cross paths with some of them. Some of them might be the right schools. I believe that being proactive in any year is really important, but this year, even more so. Coaches are going to be more targeted in the events that they are recruiting. Student athletes need to be more proactive and targeted in seeking out the events that can deliver the right exposure and the right opportunity for them. So always important to be proactive. This year, more so than ever, more important to actively seek out the opportunities that you need with the right schools, with the right coaches watching, so that you can advance your individual recruiting process at the schools that you're targeting. Last up is school-specific camps, and the way that we think about these, we're kind of specifically talking about in the fall and with the second or third round of exposure to these coaches. School-specific camps offer a great opportunity to get on campus, meet some of the girls in the softball program, meet the whole coaching staff if you haven't seen them before, and really be on campus in a softball-specific context. And so as you narrow the list of schools, you start with 35 that fit your qualities. You are able to target a lot of them at a single event or at 1 or 2 events, and you say, great, I've met these 30, and from that 30, I've narrowed it down to these 5 or 6. You can start to go to some school-specific camps in a way that won't break the bank and have you crisscrossing the country on flights all the time. And that will give you a chance to get follow-up and repeat exposure to them. to these programs, and also, especially in the fall, really start to make some concrete strides in your recruiting process if you haven't at these programs already. Now we're briefly going to touch on some of the additional resources, and then we're going to transition into the Q&A. So when it comes to kind of NCAA developments and the recruiting space, there are some great resources out there. I would point to our blog and social media as one of those things. I think we've put a lot of time into scouring the web and building a perspective that we believe can really help student athletes like you. The reason that we post on our blog, the reason that we have a social following and have a social presence is to deliver value to student athletes like you guys and give you guys the information that you guys need during this time. So feel free to give us a follow on Twitter, give us a follow on Instagram, check in on our blog. We've posted some stuff recently, including some interviews with coaches, some more stuff coming up soon. So stay in touch with us to kind of see how developments are impacting the recruiting space, especially. Another one in terms of following the development at the NCAA and specifically the D1 softball level is D1softball.com. Their Twitter account, D1 Softball, they are often the ones who are breaking some of these things, and they're texting with the A&M coaches and saying, hey, what are you hearing from the Division I Council, right? So they're going to be the ones who are able to break some of these developments and what they might mean, and also, quite honestly, offer some really good interpretations of what a one-year waiver on 12 scholarships means for different programs. Or one thing that they've put up recently is a transfer tracker. And so you are able to see, okay, what girls from what programs are starting to already request transfers to others because their coach might not be as psyched about them coming back for a fifth year. So some great resources there to stay in touch with as well. Next, and really, really importantly, the best resource on your target program is going to be your target program. So if you're interested in the school, follow their softball program on Instagram, on Twitter, follow their school or the school's admission office on Instagram and on Twitter. And also, please fill out their recruiting questionnaire if they have one on their website. Take a look at their website, fill out their recruiting questionnaire. That will give you a sense of what they're looking for, and it will also put you on their list so that when they have a development, whether it's a camp or a change or whatever, you'll be getting that update in that email. Standardized testing and admissions, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and a lot of the stuff that I am following in the development and that we are following in the development of this space comes from Compass Test Prep. And Compass Test Prep was founded by an honor roll alumni parent. He has a son who is going to University of Rochester next year, which is great, to play baseball there. And they are really focused on how the coronavirus is impacting college admissions from a standardized testing perspective. So I would take a look at their resource center. They have an updated post where they are sharing, what are the cancellations? What do they mean? What does access to standardized testing look like over the next few months? What would a digital SAT mean for student athletes and from the prep perspective? They do also offer testing preparation resources, which are excellent as well, but feel free to check out their resource center. They also did a webinar a week and a half ago where they had some college advisors, some college counselors, and also some college admissions officers on there talking about the impacts of coronavirus on standardized testing and its role in admissions specifically. So some really good resources over there. As we touched on earlier, and as Matt mentioned, we don't want you to reinvent the wheel when it comes to getting physically faster, stronger, getting better at softball, and there's some great resources out there. These are just two of them that immediately came to mind for me. Check out the NFCA, which is the National Fast Pitch Coaches Association. They have a website, nfca.org. They have a Twitter account, which is @nfca.org. So feel free to take a look there and see if there are coaching resources, drills that you can do in addition to calling on your own personal network, your hitting instructor, your travel coach, etc. Another one, and they do the package deal, great Instagram account that, it's fun, it's lively, it's former Division I softball players that really know what they're doing, and they were running events. Now they're doing some digital coaching events. Some of their content is free, others is paying for registration, so certainly don't need to invest monetarily in it. If you do, great. But they have some great resources in working with confined spaces and thinking about what's the drill work to get youth softball players better right now as well.
The other two, obviously, that are in there that we want to make sure is asking your travel program, asking your teammates and kind of what they're doing. I think that's really important. We've seen great stuff on social media of group and team workouts, group and team Zoom calls, staying together and being able to do that. So really relying on these coaches who have a lot of experience in doing that. And two is, we mentioned this, obviously, the Head First blog, social media, but us picking up the phone if you guys have questions, jumping on our live chat, those sort of things. We're here. We're not necessarily a quote unquote recruiting service, but we have a lot of experience in this space, and we're more than happy. And we love, like we're doing now at 9:22 p.m. We love doing these sort of things to be able to inform parents, to be able to make the right decisions, this summer, next fall, as we enter uncharted times, like I said, for us all.
Absolutely. And with that, and to continue being a service and a resource, we're going to transition into the live Q&A. As I mentioned before, if you have a question, type it into that questions tab, fire it away. Kevin's collecting them. He's been collecting them. And so I'm going to turn it over to him to MC this Q&A. As we do, I'm going to put these additional resources back on the screen with the addition down here of some of our contact information. So you guys can, take a look at some of these. As Matt mentioned, we are happy to be a resource as well. Pop onto our website and we have a live chat. You'll be talking with one of us. Send us an email, give us a call, whatever. Certainly feel free to get in touch and ask your questions. Kevin, take it away with the Q&A.
Great, thank you guys. First one I'll start with is one that we've seen across all of our webinars so far, which is about the use of social media in recruiting. So should you use it? What can you use it for? For example, a workout video, is that an appropriate place to put it? And how else can you use it to your advantage? And if you don't use it, are you at a disadvantage?
Yeah, so to answer that last question, no, I don't think that it's something that you have to do. But it's something that you can do that can help move you forward. One thing that's important to keep in mind is if you have a social media account, coaches are going to find it and they are going to look at it because they need to know the character of the student athletes that they're recruiting. And if you look at, scandals in college sports over the last handful of years, how many of them have started with a tweet or with an Instagram post? So being careful and being very judicious about what you are posting on your personal channels is really important. One thing that I think you can do is create a curated Instagram feed or Twitter feed, whatever, that is able to brand you as a student athlete, for lack of a better phrase. Portraying things that you feel passionately about, things in the, your dedication to the classroom, your dedication to softball and the drill work that you're doing, a soup kitchen that you volunteer at, whatever it is. But you can use it as an opportunity to portray and communicate your brand as a student athlete outbound to coaches. And it's a good place for them to go and say, I can get a pretty good sense of this player and who she is. The other thing that you can do with it is engage with college programs. You go on and you leave a comment on their post, or you like their stuff, or you start a dialogue with them. That can also be a really interesting way to use it. And again, as a way to engage with them and also demonstrate interest in the programs in which you are interested.
Max, one other thing there is to kind of add to it is email addresses with that. So I think we didn't touch on this, but what a lot of questions that we've seen is like, well, what's the best way to communicate over email, or how should I do it? I've paid for this, recruiting service or whatever it is to do that. I see actually a couple college coaches on here right now, some of our favorites. Well, the number one thing that you need to be able to do is having maybe a dedicated email that is, mattsternberg2022@gmail.com. Something that says who I am and my grad year. That's not, a cute name that's on there, or going directly through your recruiting service to send an email. Having your own email address, that is the student athletes. We've already talked about that the email is going to come from the student athlete is important. And these are all great ways to start to, like Max said, build your brand to be able to do that. Because to answer the question that came in, it's great to put up an awesome hitting video of yourself on Twitter or on Instagram or over email. Those are things that absolutely should be taking place. That's the best use of social media, but just making sure you are watching out what exactly you're doing, that it's clean, that the feeds look clean, the names look good. Those are all things that the littlest thing can tick off a college program, and especially the higher academic schools. You just don't want that mark that's on there.
Absolutely. And another thing on the emails is yes, having it be an effective brand where it's not, Red Sox Rock 617, whatever. Like, I love the Red Sox, love living in the 617, but having it be your name is a really good way to give coaches a sense of, oh, I'm getting an email from Max McKenna. I don't know who Red Sox Rocks is, right? So the other thing about that is this is an email address where you can have other eyes in this inbox, right? Parents, coaches, advisors, trusted coaches, whatever it is, can have an eye in this inbox, because as much as, professionals in 2020 who are in the working world are used to checking email, some high school students aren't. And so it's important to maybe have some other eyes in that inbox, just to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks if a coach gets back to you and you're able to check in with a player and say, hey, did you see that email that you got from Jess Johnson at Amherst? And they say, what email? And you say, great. Why don't you go on and take a look and then maybe write a reply? So that level of accountability and oversight can also help. And having it be a dedicated email for that also means that less stuff coming in from other avenues means that less stuff will get lost in that shuffle as well.
Great. The next question we have here, a really thoughtful question. So athletes, sometimes will be applying on the earlier end, specifically some of those D3 schools where coaches ask them to apply early decision or early action. With summer tests now being canceled, and, is there a scenario we see where schools would go test optional just for athletes? And for athletes who are worried about that time crunch, how can they get more information on how to navigate those tests?
Yeah, so there are a lot more schools that are at least testing the waters on going test optional. There are a lot of schools over the last couple of weeks who have said for the 2021 admission cycle or for 2021 through 2023, we are going test optional. There are a lot of schools who have announced that. I don't have a complete list, but Compass Test Prep does. And so that's a good place to check to see if the school that you are looking at has gone test optional. I got an email from Amherst today. The Amherst e-newsletter for alumni said, by the way, we're test optional for 2021. So more schools are going that way. It's not unique to student athletes, though. It is for the student body, for anybody applying, more schools are going test optional. There aren't, from what I've seen at least, any schools who are saying general student body needs to still submit test scores, but athletes do not. That I wouldn't expect to see, but more schools are going test optional because they understand that it is harder to have access to these tests. They're being canceled. You don't know when the next one is going to be. So, juniors who are planning on taking their SAT or ACT right now, when are they going to be able to take them? They don't necessarily know. And so a lot of schools are going test optional just to mitigate the impact of access to these tests.
Awesome. Another question here that we've seen on a couple of our webinars. What kind of feedback have we gotten from coaches so far, and have we heard anything about their summer plans?
So one thing yes, we have. And the thing that I would point to is everybody is in the same boat, and everybody across the country is really dealing with this with some of the same restrictions, right? For the most part. So college coaches aren't playing their season, but they're planning on playing a 2021 season. So what we've heard from coaches is largely there is going to be an appetite to get out on the recruiting trail as soon as possible and start making some moves with their recruiting classes. They have their 2020 class, but guess what? A lot of these programs, especially the high academic ones, need to recruit heavily in the 2021 class. And so I think that what we are kind of expecting is not quite a storming of the gates, so to speak, but a lot of action both from college coaches and from 2021s, 2022s, and even some 2023s getting in the process early as soon as things open back up. Matt, anything to add there in terms of what we're hearing from college coaches on the recruiting front?
No, I think that's spot on. I think coaches are chomping at the bit, right? This is supposed to be their time to be with their team, and as well as looking at what's their summer going to be set up for. with the unknowns that are out there, I think a lot of people are a little, they don't know. But life is going to go on. We are going to have kids go to school next year, and it's going to continue on, and softball will continue. So I think it just goes back to, what we started with, which is how can you prepare yourself the best that you can, because college coaches are doing the exact same thing right now. So that way, when we do take the field again, you are in that position to be able to do that. But I think they are taking it day by day, week by week, like the rest of us are. So it's not as though you guys are missing anything, that they know something that you don't, because at this point, there is just a lot of unknowns. But being able to communicate, being able to have those videos, those profiles, being able to, a lot of things that we've talked about, those are only going to help you really take that step forward in the process.
Great. A couple more questions here. In regards to sending a physical letter to a coach, right now with a lot of schools shut down, where is the best place to be sending that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would still send it to the softball office. I know that, we as a business are all working from home, but periodically we're popping in the office to make sure we're taking care of the mail that we have. And I imagine that a lot of coaches are functioning that same way. I would still send it to the softball office, to the athletic department, and let them handle it from there.
And let me jump in there. Another thing we talked about earlier is these coaches aren't, this is not like it was, 15, 20 years ago, where you're going to get a stack of letters, or, these are, every day. So even if they don't get it for 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is still a good look, because that your recruiting is not going to end in 2, 3, or 4 months. So when they do return, being able to have that on their desk, maybe it's after they saw you. Those are all good things to, again, just stand out. That's what you're trying to do. Be different than the rest of the people that are out there.
Great. A couple questions here on sort of the impact on roster sizes and roster makeup over the next couple of years. So for these players who do have an extra year of eligibility, is there any sort of deadline when they have to make a decision about using that, or is this a process we're going to have to follow along with and see how it plays out?
It's a great question. My understanding of it is that student athletes do not have to actively claim anything. They are just all granted it. So this year's freshmen come back next year, and it's just kind of like this half season never happened. And next year is their first year of eligibility. So there would have to be conversations, for example, for a senior who's going to come back for a fifth year, whether that's next year or the year after that or the year after that, a conversation with their coach certainly and with their athletic department, but those are going to be one-offs. But there doesn't have to be, like right now, a freshman softball player or a junior softball player does not need to walk in and say, I'm planning on taking my fifth year of eligibility. It is granted to everybody. There's no paperwork associated with it. It's going to be more dictated by one-off conversations with players who are deciding between moving on or not with their coach and with their individual program.
Great. And the second question there, for players who decide to move on, are there any limitations to where they can go? Or is this a situation, for example, while maybe more rare, we could see a Division I player now going to a Division III school where they have the opportunity to use that year of eligibility?
Great question. That is the case. I mean, there was a kid who I coached who played at Virginia. This is on the baseball side. He was a pitcher for Virginia Tech for 2 years. Or 3 years, redshirted 1 year. And then he was looking to transfer because the coaching staff turned over, and he didn't want to sit out a year, because in a typical year, if you transfer from one division program to another, you have to sit a year before you're able to play. He transferred to NYU and was dominant at NYU. He was great. So that does happen. I think it's pretty infrequent. It could happen, but again, players who are playing at the Division I level and are having success there, if they're a very good Division I player, they're 99% of the time they're looking at transfer opportunities to other peer schools or better schools. They're trying to go from, a mid-major college softball program to a Power 5 college softball program. So I think that while it can happen, I don't think you'll see that much of it, just by the nature of the types of players who would be transferring to take advantage of this fifth year.
Great. And last question that I'll ask right now. Something that we get this question during normal recruiting period, so always important, especially important right now. Let's say I send my first email to a coach tomorrow, just some background information, introducing myself. How long should I wait until that next outreach, and what do I include in it?
Great question, but I'm actually going to turn around a bit. I don't think that it's an amount of time that you're going to wait. I don't think that it's like, well, I sent an email on the 16th, so I'm going to wait until the 30th, and then I'm going to wait until the next 14th. Like, it's not a 2 week waiting period or a 1 week or a 1 month. The key in communicating with coaches is having a reason to contact them. Having an update for them, whether it's a new video or a new test score or a new transcript, whatever it is, having something new is a really good reason to email them. Just saying, I'm going to email Coach Gabriel at McAllister because it's Tuesday and I promised myself I was going to email her every Tuesday. Some coaches might like that, but a lot more are going to say, I did not necessarily need to get this email just because it's a Tuesday. So the kind of cheat code that I think of for when should I email a coach is, when do you have something new to tell them or new to show them? That's when you should email them.
But to jump in, I think that the counter is, well, right now there's not a lot of action going on. There's not a lot to report. I think it's being able to come up with things here and there and check-ins periodically. So I think that, yes, you don't want to say like every 14 days on my calendar, I'm going to put, this is how I do it. It's just that there's no point of doing that. It's not like in the business world. But at the same time, I think being able to check in even on a monthly or 5 or 6 weeks just to find a reason to do it can potentially help you out during this time until we hopefully get into the summer period. But really, just to email, that's a good way for a coach to see it. And again, just for it to go out the door.
Absolutely. You can create some reasons to email them with some updates that you're able to create so that you can have more regular contact. That's a really good point, Matt.
And Coach Gabriel's, she's the best. She'll get back to you if you need
She
to,
will.
right? McAllister is the best.
Go Scots.
Great. I think that's a good spot to wrap up the live Q&A. If anyone does have any other questions, I'll stay in the chat for a little bit, so feel free to send them my way. And as mentioned earlier, if any questions come up later after you've had a chance to reflect on all this, contact information is up there on the screen. Feel free to reach out to us.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. Happy to be a resource for you guys however we can moving forward. Best of luck. We hope to see you down the road in the recruiting trail. Always feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Good night.